So for the past 3 to 4 months, I've been recording all of my videos using full-on scripts. But since I started doing that, I kind of found that there were a few challenges in the way that I was going about it. So what I usually do is I'll write out a full-on script, and then as I'm recording, I'll maybe memorize like 1 or 2 sentences from the script, and then represent that to the camera best I can. The problem is, it's a little hard to memorize each of those individual lines, and I usually found myself repeating a certain line 5 or 6 times at the most, if I just can't remember it. But about a month ago, I ended up getting a teleprompter. So this is the Glide Gear TMP50. It's a relatively inexpensive teleprompter, but it's worked for everything that I needed it to do and did a really good job at helping me produce my videos using those scripts. But what's interesting is that as I did my research ahead of time on things like best practices when using a teleprompter, things to expect, and all that kind of thing, I found that in my own experience, there are a lot of things that I personally found that a lot of people didn't actually talk about in their own videos or blog posts or anything like that. In a lot of ways, it's been pretty much everything that I've hoped it would be, but it's also had a few unexpected drawbacks and things that I never really thought about when I was thinking of getting one for myself. So I just wanted to make this video to give you a bit of an honest view of my personal experience using a teleprompter and give you an idea if you're considering one for yourself, if you should pick one up, and what are some of the things that you should expect yourself. So I'm going to break this video up into multiple different aspects and points about my experiences using the teleprompter. And the first one that I want to start with is that using a teleprompter has definitely made the actual process of recording a lot easier. As a bit of an example, I've recorded about 2 shorts so far using a teleprompter, and usually what I found is that my shorts take a good maybe 3 to 5 minutes just to record one short because of the problem with memorizing scripts that I mentioned earlier. But since I got the teleprompter, I've actually found that the amount of time that I'm able to spend is way less. I'm able to record both of those shorts in pretty much the same 3 to 5 minutes. So it just becomes so much less time consuming and so much more streamlined. Like I mentioned earlier, it's really nice to just have the teleprompter right in front of you as you're speaking, because then you don't have to go back and try to memorize your lines or try to figure out where you are if you lose your place. I know when I record my videos, and even recording this one right now, I kind of tend to lose my place a little bit from time to time. Sometimes I present a line and it doesn't quite come out the way I expect it to. And so when that happens, my brain just kind of does a little bit of a reset, and I have to kind of remember where I was when I first began speaking, what I said before, so I know that the information flows properly. And that can be a little bit of a challenge if you're trying to record without having the information in front of you and you don't have a set structure. And you can technically have a set structure if you have, for example, outlines that you're improvising from. Even still, when I record a lot of my videos, I don't necessarily go for the outline line by line, especially in the intro. I know my intros, I tend to wing them a bit more and kind of present what feels a bit more natural and how I think I can best let that flow right then and there. But definitely a lot more in the information. I tend to go a bit more line by line, but even then it's a bit harder to come back to because, again, you're very much winging it whenever you're using an outline. But if you're using a full-on script, especially with a teleprompter, it definitely makes that a lot easier. And like I mentioned earlier, I don't have to go back and try to memorize those individual lines. I can just have it all right here with me, right in front of me. And what's interesting is that even in my last video, I did use the teleprompter, but I tried to do a different approach when using the teleprompter. Because usually I'll go in, I'll read my scripts word for word and all of that. But last time I kind of used my script as partially guidance and another part kind of something to fall back on in case I lost my place or I didn't know how to word something. So what happened was I would have my script in front of me, but I would just kind of disconnect myself from the script in a sense and just kind of let the words flow a bit more naturally instead of reading them word for word. If I lose my place, I'll just scroll right back up and I know right back where to start from. And even if I'm not entirely sure about the wording, what I can usually do is just then start reading the script word for word. And so I kind of have something planned out ahead of time that I can say. And because using a teleprompter makes recording so much easier, it also helps reduce the amount of time that I spend editing my videos. So usually what happens whenever I make mistakes in my videos is when I go to edit, I'll have to spend a lot of time cutting out those bad takes, or in some cases even combining takes if maybe I start I make a mistake or I start in the middle of a line and then have to go back and kind of splice my takes together. But when I'm using a script on a teleprompter, that tends to make things a lot easier because I make fewer mistakes. And also because that information is a lot more structured, then I kind of have a bit more of an idea of where I need to leave off and where everything is placed in my videos. Sometimes when I improvise, what I find is that I may record some information and then move on to another section. But if I make a mistake and need to restart, sometimes I'll realize I left out some information in the last section. And so then I'll go back to that last section, present that information, and then restart the next one, if that makes sense. And so what that does in the editing timeline is that it kind of mixes up the information here and there, and it becomes a lot harder to find out where it is I left off. And so when it comes to editing, using a teleprompter, or rather recording and then editing that video recorded from the teleprompter, I found it kind of makes things a lot more structured. And also one of the really nice side benefits of using a teleprompter is that it can kind of help you be a bit more confident on video. I've noticed that whenever I use a teleprompter or even just a script without a teleprompter, it helps me to project a bit more and have a little more energy in my voice. I tend to find that when it comes to improvising, I'm having to constantly think about what I'm saying while also thinking about how I'm going to say it. But when it comes to using a script, I can kind of funnel more of that energy into how I'm going to say it, and then I pretty much already have what I'm going to say done ahead of time. And then of course, using a teleprompter just makes it a lot easier because then I can just read it as it's going along and then focus on using my hands more, focus on giving my voice a little more energy, a little bit more inflection. And so in general, that kind of helps to make me appear a bit more confident on camera. And like I said a bit earlier, scripts don't actually have to be word for word necessarily. You could even, if you wanted to, put an outline on a teleprompter, and then as you go along, just kind of have the point that you want to present staring at you through your teleprompter. And then when you're done, maybe scroll down to the next one, or maybe have them just slowly scrolling as you're speaking. There are a bunch of ways to use a teleprompter, and like I said earlier, my last video wasn't necessarily word for word the entire time. There definitely were times where it was word for word, but for the most part, I just kind of let go a little bit and just got a little bit flowy with it, a little bit more natural with it. And I think that kind of helped made it appear a bit more conversational instead of just presenting the information. Now, even though using a teleprompter has been really helpful for me in my own videos, teleprompters take a bit more time to learn, and they need a few more skills in order to develop. And it's because of that teleprompters aren't necessarily easier to learn than learning how to improvise. I always kind of felt like maybe reading a script from a teleprompter would just in general be easier because you have all of your words in front of you, but it turns out that that's not necessarily the case, because now you're not really just kind of speaking from experience or speaking from your knowledge, you're speaking more from the camera, and you're having to know how to present the information. So it's just a different way of presenting. You're not so much kind of getting your thoughts out there, but you have to figure out how to talk in a way that sounds natural, because one of the problems with using a teleprompter is that you can come across as a bit more unnatural. I won't lie, as much as I like how teleprompters can make you feel a bit more confident on camera, I've also found that they can also make you come across as not very natural. Like maybe you're not as conversational, maybe you sound a bit more wooden, like you're actually reading from a script, or maybe you're kind of talking in a bit of an unnatural way, like you're just presenting the information instead of just kind of talking about it. And maybe in some applications that might be a little bit better, but on YouTube, having that bit of a more conversational aspect is definitely a lot more important, because that's in general what a lot of people tend to connect with. And in general, I found that teleprompters can add a little bit of complexity to the recording process. So whenever you're recording from with an outline or whatever, all you've got to do is pretty much just set up your phone, set up your microphone, and start talking. But when it comes to using a teleprompter, you have a few more steps involved. You gotta set up the phone, you've gotta set up the second phone so you can have your teleprompter software. You've gotta copy your script over, set up the software, you gotta mount the tripod. There are a few extra steps involved. And I think that if you do truly benefit from a teleprompter, then those extra steps are absolutely worth it. But if you're a beginner who's just starting out, maybe you're still getting used to the whole setup and production process, then this could probably add one or two roadblocks to the process. Now, I do think that you could definitely make an argument either for or against a teleprompter, and it really depends on the person that you are and the types of videos that you're trying to make. I think teleprompters are personally best for people who are newer to YouTube, or maybe make more information heavy videos or more professional videos, anything like that, where having the information in front of you is absolutely key. And especially if you're not that good at improvising like I am in general, then I think that having that script in front of you could definitely be a bit of a help. And you could especially use a teleprompter in general to kind of maybe wean yourself off of scripts and then work more towards improvising, and then maybe even get yourself off the teleprompter at some point to make your videos a bit more conversational. But the people who I think probably wouldn't benefit as much from a teleprompter are maybe the people who are a bit more experienced behind the camera, or maybe have better conversation or speaking skills, who are better at improvising. Maybe they're focusing more of their videos on personal stories, and therefore kind of just speaking from the heart is a bit more in line with the kind of content that you're doing. And then maybe also if you're making just more conversational videos in general, then not using a teleprompter would be right for you. But both approaches do have their own set of skills, and I think a big part of it as well is going to be which skills are willing to build. Do you want to build those more conversational aspects of presenting without a teleprompter, or do you want to use a teleprompter and get better at sort of the acting, for lack of a better term, skills that you need to develop? It's definitely up to you, and whichever skills that you go for, I think that would definitely determine whether or not you would want to go with a teleprompter. Thank you so much for watching this video. I really appreciate it. And if you want to watch more videos like this, then be sure to check out this video right here next, and I'll see you over there. Adios.